to step back from Rogan and to offer I don't want a sort of charitable view, right? The left is very used to being essentially irrelevant to American politics. They're used to being on the fringe, where then it actually makes some sense. And Ben Burgess actually made this point to me. I want to give him credit for this. It actually makes some sense when you're on the fringe, when you have no relevance and potential to claim any power, to have these sort of moral fights. What are we really about? What are the real litmus tests about? And so we've continued to operate in that framework of assuming that we're completely irrelevant to power, even as that's not really true anymore. I mean, you have some representatives in Congress who have left-wing views. You have Bernie Sanders come pretty damn close to being president of the United States. So in the wake of Bernie's defeat, there's been this total splintering, and it's just devolved back to all of these purity tests and infighting and everybody trying to demonstrate that they're the pure lefty, that they're the one who's espousing, that they're not associating with any of those bad people. And it's really counterproductive if you actually want to grow a movement and move things forward.
All right. My name is Ben Burgess. This is Give Them an Argument. I am joined by producer Cale Brooks and producer, YouTube editor Kelly Carey. And the voice you just heard was Crystal Ball, talking about a little bit of what I talk about in the new book, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, a critique of the contemporary left, which is available everywhere that books are sold. Although if you want to support a worker-owned bookstore, that's redemmas.org. But of course, that's about the critique part. The other thing that Crystal mentions in that clip is that there have been some real advances. We're going to be talking about one of those a little bit later, the victory of India Walton in Buffalo, which is amazing. Actually, it's the first time a self-declared socialist has been the mayor of a major city in the United States, or will be mayor of a major city in the United States since 1960, and all of that obviously puts, makes some people very afraid. Byron Brown, the current mayor of Buffalo, has been going on today about how everybody needs to still vote for him, even though he lost the Democratic primary in the write-in as a write-in candidate in the general election, because otherwise you're going to have a radical socialist who is going to be mayor of Buffalo, and I don't know, everything will be on fire, and there'll be cats and dogs living together, and there'll be pandemonium. And so I wanted to get in. I know this is a little bit of a mean thing to do to Cale and Kelly to make them watch this, but I wanted to get into the really good stuff as far as the reasons that have been given why democratic socialism is a bad and terrible thing. You want to go to the highest level source of this, which is of course Prager University.
They're really good, and you should check them out. You should like and subscribe their channel. So I'm gonna pull up.
Spend a couple days, guys.
Yeah.
Find out all about it.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll jump right into it, and then we'll just do a little starting and stopping at all of our favorite moments. So
let's do it.
Like and fave.
In the contemporary world, it's taken as a given that capitalism, with its free market and profit motive, is based on selfishness and produces selfishness.
True.
While socialism is based on selflessness and produces selflessness.
All right, hit like and subscribe. They got it.
The end.
Yeah.
Well, the opposite is true.
Wait,
its intention.
The opposite is true?
What?
It's not that. It's actually the opposite of that.
I might have to revoke my hit like and subscribe. But,
okay. Yeah. Now I'm really confused. I want to know where this is going.
Yeah, we got a little production setting right now. This is the scene.
Socialism produces far more selfish individuals and a far more selfish society than a free market economy does. And once this widespread selfishness catches on, it is almost impossible to undo it. Here's an illustration. In 2010, the United States President Barack Obama addressed a large audience of college students. At one point in his speech, he announced that young people will now be able to remain on their parents' health insurance plan until age 26. I don't ever recall hearing a louder, more thunderous, or more sustained applause than I did then.
It's the historic world record, actually, just so you guys know.
That is the most people have ever applauded for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's amazing. All right. So, but that sounds like a good thing that people can have health insurance for another year. So I'm guessing we're about to find out this is a bad thing.
Kind of.
Okay.
Had the president announced that a cure for cancer had been discovered, it is highly doubtful that the applause would have been as loud or as long.
Yeah, pause it there, Kel.
Yeah.
So it just struck me there that more than that one person would have had cancer in the audience. So just statistically, so like, I mean, at least more than that one person would have cheered. At least like maybe possibly 70% of the audience would have at least known someone with cancer. Probably more.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, they're cheering as if it would cure for cancer, and of course, like people being on health, like having health insurance for a year when they wouldn't, will literally stop some people from dying of cancer. Like,
well, true, but all these people are just selfish, right? So these are the selfish people, and so if they're purely selfish, then only selfish, reasoned people would cheer. So if they were only selfish, only the people with cancer or who knew someone with cancer would cheer. And I'm still saying that it would almost be everyone in the crowd.
Yeah.
Well, also the spoiler, I'm spoiling a little bit of it, but of course, as they've already set up, it's well, no, but they're saying that like those people that are infected with socialism become selfish. And this presumes that, at the beginning of Obama's term, when he was announcing that young adults could stay on their parents' plans, that we are therefore living in socialism.
Oh, they were infected as soon as he got elected. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, they became selfish once Obama started doing the socialism. I want to as we all remember what happened, when Obama was president.
Socialism reigned.
I do want to say, like, anybody who is, really, like, one of the big consequences of not having health insurance is that you're way less likely to go to the doctor, which means that if you have like something that could be nothing and could be cancer, like people do, and you're like a lot more likely to roll the dice because, like, even if it's no big deal, which it probably is, but maybe it's a medium deal, and one way or the other, you don't have the money, and it's probably fine, right? So you won't do it. So I mean, I know this is an obvious point I'm harping on, but like, also people die of lots of stuff besides cancer. But anyway,
yeah. How does anyone watch this and take him seriously after he says that it's highly doubtful that only one person in the audience would cheer for that we have a cure for cancer? It's just such a dumb phrase, just like really moronic.
Kel,
yeah, I mean, I think people
you were around for the past 4 years, right? Are you still alive right now? Where are you? What year is it, Kel?
I'm living in a very blissful 2009 right now.
Oh my God, is it socialism?
Yeah, that's why I produced the YouTube videos.
When Obama got elected, I was in Times Square, and what happened was I walked outside of where I was. He was elected. Everything was free. And I just went around to like wherever I wanted, and I got just all free stuff, and I went home, and I was like, called my landlord, and I was like, no rent, right? And he was like, that's right. And, I was like, that's awesome, man. Let's party. And I partied with my former landlord, then current best friend. for the next 8 years. And then he had to go back to being in the mob after that.
This sounds kind of like the conservatives' vision of the world, though, where it's like the tenants and the landlords are just like best friends, but they maintain the same social relations between each other. Like there's no conflict between them. They just, I'll, very happily give you my rent money every month. I mean, obviously in your scenario, you weren't paying rent, but like that, like just the end of class antagonism, but maintaining the class relations is like, that's basically what conservatives want.
Well, no, we had a neighborhood, we had a club hangout. I can't even, it's because it's real. I can't tell you. It's really funny. Never mind. But
let's watch a little more of the
sorry, Ben.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Ben. It's a serious show, Cal. Stop it.
Yeah, come on. That's Dennis Prager has a serious critique to make of the social
dangerous man
Obama did in 2009 and how it shows that socialism is all about selfishness. So let's take it seriously. Let's watch it.
Fair.
As loud or as long. But what were they so happy about? To be told that you can now remain dependent on your parents until age 26 should strike a young person as demeaning, not liberating.
I mean, that's sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's like why our system fucking sucks. But
yeah, right. I mean, of course, like the big point here is that like socialists do not typically think that that Obama extending like the time that you can be on your parents' health insurance to the age of 26 is everything that we should want out of a healthcare system. They want Medicare for all. That everybody be given health insurance, by the state, no strings attached, which would actually cut those strings, tying people to their parents because they wouldn't rely on them for health insurance anymore. The same way that
tying it to labor, period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that too, right? That you're not dependent. I mean, there's a book by Aru Partanen, I think is her name, who's a Finnish journalist who moved to she married an American, moved to the United States. It's called The Nordic Way of Everything, and she talks about how when she got to the started living in the United States, she started noticing all this stuff about relationships between parents and children and husbands and wives and bosses and workers that seemed like pre-modern to her because she came out of a society where stuff like healthcare and higher education was free. So you didn't have to, people didn't have to rely on their parents to pay their college tuition. So they weren't worried about that, those bills being cut off all the time. People didn't stay in bad marriages because they were worried about losing health insurance. People didn't stay in, jobs with bosses they hated quite as much, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, if you want to be, if you want to be not reliant on your parents, this seems like, social democracy and, socialism would seem to be for you.
Well, that's not what this video says. So let's learn the truth.
Throughout American history, and for that matter, all of Western history, the great goal of young people was to become a mature adult, beginning with being independent of mom and dad.
Agreed. But again, this is a very weird outcome we're about to get, or like a solution to get there.
Socialism and the welfare state destroy this aspiration. In various European countries, and now increasingly in the U.S., it is becoming common for young people to live with their parents well into their 30s and not infrequently beyond.
Wrong. We have evidence that that's not true. That this is actually, Bhaskar showed this not too long ago, but that when you actually look at the share of young people aged 25 to 34 still living with their parents, the lowest percentages are in the classic Nordic countries. So Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Denmark. And, in countries like France, Iceland are doing all right. It's all the countries that got like IMF shock therapy in like the Baltics that are really screwed. And shock therapy is just like like neoliberalism on steroids, just like price liberalization everywhere, privatization, cutting of the welfare state. Like, it's just so, like, the actual history is that when you cut the welfare state, people end up, in much more dire economic straits.
You're more likely, if you're economically precarious, you don't have health insurance, you're not it's like you have way less job stability, etc. Yeah, no kidding. Like, you're a lot more likely to have to live with your parents. Which, by the way, I love Bosco's tweet about this. He said that Jordan Peterson to young adults, stop whining and clean your room. Democratic Socialist to young adults, how about an apartment of your own and some health care? We're gonna win.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I've seen some pretty different numbers just from the past year and a half because of COVID.
Yeah, of course.
With some permanency attached to them, because not permanency, but like gave up their separate home and moved in with their parents. But I mean, I don't know how long that type of shift will. And I'm talking about in this country. I'm not sure how long that will last. But I mean, that doesn't just lost
jobs because of COVID. Lots of people are we're working remotely, and it made sense to save money by moving back in. I think even just anecdotally,
you have to think about where certain things are failing as well. Like it's not just that things are failing on the younger people's end. Things are failing on the parents or the older relatives, and people are choosing to be like, okay, well, if we combine resources, then it just makes a lot more sense that it doesn't make any sense to put anyone in a home, but if we all live together, then we can make the resources work, just like it works in like tons of other societies. Not that we're going to have that in America, but it just wasn't the way that we thought. We thought in America, it's always been like self-sufficiency. Like everyone has to have like completely separate dwellings in order to be successful. So says this guy.
Right. Let's finish up the video, and then we'll finish talking about it.
Sounds good.
And why not? In the welfare state, taking care of yourself is no longer a virtue. Why? Because the government will take care of you. Therefore, socialism enables, and as a result produces, people whose preoccupations become more and more self-centered. How many benefits will I receive from the government? Will
a lot.
The government pay for my education?
Yes.
Will the government pay for my health care?
Yes.
What is the youngest age at which I can retire?
Really young.
How much paid vacation time can I get?
A lot.
How many days can I call in sick and still get paid?
All of them.
How many weeks of paid paternity or maternity leave am I entitled to?
As much as you need. In fact, just have another child. Keep going.
The list gets longer with every election of a liberal or progressive or left-wing party. Yeah. And then each entitlement becomes a right.
That's why it's
called an entitlement. There are even more destructive effects of socialism. Entitlements create citizens who lack a character trait that every human should have: gratitude. You cannot be happy if you are not grateful, and you cannot be a good person if you're not grateful. That's why we constantly tell our children, say thank you. But socialism undoes that. After all, why would a person be grateful for receiving an entitlement? Who's going to be grateful for getting what they're entitled to? So instead of thank you, the citizen of the welfare state is taught to say, what more am I entitled to? Yet the left insists that it's capitalism and the free market, not socialism, that produces selfish people. But the truth is that capitalism and the free market produce much less selfish people. teaching people to work hard and take care of themselves and others, and that they should earn what they receive, produces less selfish, not more selfish people. Capitalism teaches people to work more. Socialism teaches people to demand more.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that's the thing, but it's like people have to work more literally because if they don't, they will starve and die, because there's a compulsion, because we all exist on markets in every aspect of our lives. So yeah, we all have to work really fucking hard. And who likes that?
Sirs, may I make a couple of comments?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, they literally had to make everyone in this video blue in order for it not to be just like outrageously obvious that everyone in this whole video had to be white except for Obama. Okay. Because like you are ignoring like entire swaths of the country, and you're only talking about this country, I think, for any of this stuff to make sense, right? I mean, you're just leaving out capitalism leaves entire sectors of people out, communities of people out, that's the whole problem, which leads to all the problems that we have, and in various ways.
Well, these are the blue people who were told their lives matter, but perhaps they don't in capitalism, according to Prager.
Those were cops.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. The blue lives matter are cops. They're not literally blue people.
Oh, they're literally blue.
Okay.
Goodness.
Okay. Yeah.
I had another point, which is that Dennis Prager has obviously had Botox in his forehead. I'm going to leave that there because, I'm sorry, look at the rest of his face, but look at his forehead. I don't know.
That man's 150 years old. He's looking great.
That's neither here nor there, but the rest of his face is it is melting off of his face, but his forehead is smooth as a baby's bottom. This has nothing to do with anything. I'm just saying.
No, it is. Now that you've said it, I can't unsee it. But
I know that's what I was saying. It's either he got really obsessed with forehead Botox, or it melted downwards, and he's a really good example of gravity, and he should switch up what his university is about, which it should be about gravity.
It's just a more enlightened figure, that's all. Just nice smooth brain.
Which attitude do you think will make a better society?
Socialism.
I'm Dennis Prager.
All right, fun shit.
Yeah, so I guess a few thoughts. One is that that he's equated socialism and welfare state, which are related things, not the same thing, right? I mean, welfare states have been built by socialist parties and working class movements, and and they're very, very good things. And it's certainly true that part of what Eric Oldright says, the two big sort of things motivating socialists are, trying to socially empower everybody and make sure everybody's basic needs are met. And, welfare states do the second one, partially. But also, with welfare states, and this goes back to what we were talking about last time, he's conflating, stuff like Obamacare that's means tested and has all these limits, and you can stay on your parents' health insurance until 26, at 27 you're still shit out of luck, with the sort of sweeping actual entitlements to healthcare and education and all the rest that socialists want, but also you shouldn't actually have to be grateful to anybody for being allowed to see a doctor when you get sick, or to to go to or to be able to go to school and not have to drop out, because you can't afford it, or for that matter, to have a voice and a vote on the job. I mean, those all seem like things that you should get for being people. And I don't, and by the way, I don't particularly think the great advantage of socialism is that we'll all be like better people and, less selfish and whatever. If anything, I think that the reason that we have to get rid of capitalism is that the amount of power that workers have, that like bosses have over workers and, and different, segments of society have over others under capitalism is way too much power for anybody to be trusted with, given that, that we're all very flawed people. But I guess my big thing is I don't understand this thing has a zillion views. I should say it came to my attention because there's a YouTuber called Stuff Lucky Black Cat who did a thing about it, which is very long, but or it's not very long, but certainly too long to play here. I'll link to it in the description. But like, I want to know who watches this and thinks, man, that sounds terrible to me. That I would be like, I would get all these days off and, and I get maternity or paternity leave and health care and, none of that, please.
Well, I think that Cale should answer this because he's the oldest.
My first thing is like, part of it is that Prager's trying to make the case that the social structure, basically, whether it be capitalism or socialism, that it largely shapes people's attitudes and their dispositions, and that's true. But he, of course, like smuggled into that is, of course, like his notion of human nature is still that everyone is extremely selfish and only looks out for themselves ex ante, even before you enter into an economic system. So that where an economic system exists where people's needs are met and where things are run more cooperatively, people necessarily will find a way to break in, destroy it because they won't say thank you or something. But obviously that's just not true. I mean, we know, just as being like human beings that interact with other human beings, that like a massive part of living is having social relations with others, with having friendships, with having we depend on other people. We can't get by solely on ourselves. And so fundamental to human nature is this, sure, on the one hand, we're not all saints, we're not all hyper altruistic, but we also do care about one another and we do need one another. And so having social institutions and structures that foster those qualities that do make us more communal would presumably end up enhancing those qualities of human nature and tamper some of the more selfish aspects. We have like research on this. Like there are scientists who study, who have done studies on like, basically they look at where they exist or where they have existed in the modern era, non-capitalist, more what's term like primitive societies, and they'll look at how people relate to one another, and they do tend to be more communal. That like so much of how we end up selfish is truly just capitalism. That like we are a cooperative species.
Yeah, of course, it only makes sense. I mean, you expend more energy. I mean, it's just it's like a law of physics. You're going to expend more energy doing the same task separately for 12 different people than if you did it for as one for 12 people. You're just gonna, I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, if you're throwing like a few scraps and making everybody fight over it, like that, then obviously, you're going to get more vicious behavior than you would if everybody is well fed. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be awesome. And, you're not going to have all sorts of selfish and horrible behavior under any system, because people are flawed. But I mean, like, certainly making people try to survive in these conditions and compete against each other for everything is not going to bring out the best in anyone.
Well, and, I mean, I'm not the scholar on this, Ben is, but I mean, no offense, Cal. Yeah, maybe you are. Then I don't know about it.
No,
but,
just Ben.
Okay, it's just Ben. So, but, you know, some people just are not going to get used to getting this competitive over things. Like some people just aren't going, like the system isn't going to keep, to, you know, to chew them up and spit out a hyper competitive person. You know, even if like you get with the program for a certain number of years, like and you just kind of don't turn out that way. Like it just doesn't, you try to like fit that mold and it just doesn't really, because you weren't that way in the beginning. You know, I mean, capitalism doesn't really, if you were a more like cooperative type of person, you can't make yourself a more, I mean, I guess if you're not that aggressive to begin with, you can't like necessarily make yourself more aggressive by the end of things, and more competitive and more selfish just because of capitalism.
Well, there's a ton of people who can't keep up, and then the elites tell us, you know, well, it's their fault because they're slackers because they want to mooch off the welfare state or something. But we should, in the same way that we say, you know, children shouldn't have to work, people, you know, way later in their life shouldn't have to work, disabled people, you know, should have, maybe they shouldn't be working as hard. Someone who's highly disabled, for instance. People who, you know, are just naturally not going to be able to keep up with the pace of like capitalist productivity increases. Maybe that's actually something that we should, you know, consider something that we take care of as a society and say that, you know, broadly people should be working as hard, but, you know, these people are human beings that need to be taken care of and looked after as well. And we just have a much more expansive notion of like what it means to take care of someone else in society.
I mean, I think that, yeah, the phrase, you know, looked after comes up a lot, and when we talk about these things, and it bothers me because it can mean a lot of different things, and some people in like the structure in like the society that we live in right now can't look after people in ways that we think of as looking after people, but could, if society were structured in another way, look after people in ways that people need to be looked after, like in profound ways. You know, I mean, we don't put a whole lot of importance on like emotional, like certain like emotional daily well-being check-ins and stuff like that. We just don't. We don't like it. It's meaningless to us. But in reality, it's not, because then when people snap, it's like, oh, we like do this, like, you know, we do like an audit of like what happened, and it's like, well, a lot of things. A lot of things happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. So yep, this is. I guess I have to say after this entire discussion, I actually don't think I'm going to like and subscribe to Prager University. I think Kelly and Kale made some good points, and I don't know that I'd actually support the work.
Kale and I are going to get degrees from that university.
Yeah, I'm kind of more on the fence now, Ben, but we can go on to the next thing.
All right, fair enough. Thank you so much, Kelly.
I'm at least getting like the Botox.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that they have. I would imagine that when you enroll at Prager University, everybody gets the forehead Botox just to start. But all right, thanks, Kelly.
Bye, guys.
Bye. All right. So before we bring on Connor and Ryan from Buffalo DSA, do want to play just a couple of minutes of my conversation over the weekend with Glenn Greenwald. We're going to be replaying that on the our channel. I mean, if you want, you can go out and find that or the full thing right now, but we're going to be replaying that on our channel in full on Wednesday. But let's just watch a quick teaser now, and then we'll bring on Ryan and Connor.
You would probably need just one hand to count the number of people who you could identify as prominent left-wing voices, say, in Congress, let alone like the institutional left. And I think a lot of people, especially people who aren't on the left, it's like this weird phenomenon I've noticed. It's not all unique to the left, which is that every political faction always believes that they're always on the losing side of things. Everyone always believes that their faction is losing everything, that they have no power, that they're always oppressed, right? It's almost maybe something tribal that is in us. But I think when you look at the left, when you look at obvious things like the number of elected members of Congress who would say like identify openly with the Democratic Socialists of America, what are there like maybe 8 to 10 of them as opposed to 1 or 0 before? The fact that the Bernie movement in 2016 almost took down the Clinton machine and probably would have had the DNC not cheated, and came very close again in 2020 had Obama not, done his magic. But on top of that, success in local races, success in state races, and just like a very kind of influential presence in the culture wars as well. I mean, I think, you would have to say that when it comes to the culture wars, the left seems to be winning on marriage equality and trans issues and abortion and those kind of things. What's your argument for why the left isn't succeeding?
Yeah, so I guess I want to disaggregate a couple of things. Like I think that some of those social issues that you mentioned, there has been tons of progress on them, partially because I think the culture war moves on. The line of scrimmage changes. I saw there's a poll the other, within the last week or two. In fact, I think I saw you post it. That like 55% of Republicans, are fine with same-sex marriage now.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes as some of the social and cultural battles are lost, by social conservatives, they'll move on to new things, and those certainly are. I mean, both of those examples. I mean, those certainly are welcome bits of social progress from my perspective. Although I think it's also worth noting that those aren't advances that particularly threaten the bottom line of the most powerful people in our society, right? I mean, like whether which is not to say that they're inconsequential or I don't care about them. I do, but it's just not the case that whether Goldman Sachs is going to have black, gay, trans people in certain positions or not, that they're going to make just as much money one way or the other. That doesn't really impact them. In fact, if anything, in some ways, I know that on the left, we sometimes really want it to be the case that all the things that we don't like are marching in the same direction, so we can have a kind of unambiguous moral judgment. But in some ways, it's actually good for capital to get past certain kinds of arbitrary prejudices, because that way you can just work as an efficient machine. You're the best person for the job, without worrying too much about stuff like that. All right, so. Again, just a little taste. We're going to replay the whole thing on Wednesday, but right now I want to bring on Connor and Ryan from Buffalo DSA because I'm very, very excited about this. What's been going on there? The victory of India Walton in the Democratic primary looks like she's going to become the first socialist who's been going to be the major mayor of a major city since 1960. To put this in perspective, when Bernie was mayor of Burlington, that's a city of 40,000 people. So this is a big deal. So thanks, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I want to hear just a little bit. We've only got a few minutes, but I want to hear just a little bit about what Buffalo DSA has been up to in general. But I mean, first, how did this happen? I mean, this is great, but from our perspective outside of Buffalo, seems to kind of come out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, it definitely took all of us by surprise as well. I think there's part of it is an element of they kind of, got caught with their pants down, or they were kind of asleep at the wheel. I think a lot of them, I think the establishment didn't take her very seriously. And I think Byron Brown was in an interesting position because he tried very hard not to draw attention to the race. He famously refused to debate her, despite multiple requests to debate her. Even in his negative ads, he didn't mention her by name. So he tried very hard to kind of, keep the attention down. Whereas, we were doing everything we could to, drive the media cycle, talk to people. So that was kind of the basic dynamics. And now, of course, that she's won, they're kind of spinning. So Ben, I don't know if you heard the recent news about this election.
Yeah, I think we actually have a clip of this. Kale, do you have this?
Since primary election night, June 22nd, there has been an incredible reaction in the community. I have stayed out of the public spotlight for a few days because I wanted to hear from the people of Buffalo. And the people of Buffalo are speaking loudly and clearly. I have literally heard from thousands of residents of Buffalo who have said to me that they want me to continue my campaign for re-election as mayor of the city of Buffalo as a write-in candidate.
Yeah, well, with any luck, the people who contacted him are the only people who are going to write him in. But yeah, this is and parts we didn't play. It gets much weirder. He talks. Yeah, you're muted, Ryan. But he talks about how it's how dangerous and horrible it's going to be to have this radical socialist who's in the mayor's office. So just really quickly, I mean, do you run down some of the basic things that she was running on?
Yeah. So I think her first was 3 primary points. So she came to us in September of 2020, right after the summer, asked for a questionnaire to come through, and her main policy points were on public health, housing, and fiscal accountability. Interesting. I mean, even after the summer of 2020, she also didn't interestingly go straight for a abolished police line in terms of running a campaign. It was more about accountability and then a positive program in order to actually get that through, which I think factored in very well, because also if you notice, I think the sheriff's race, we had 3 sheriffs on the run. There was a activist from the summer who ran for sheriff, and in that same regard, he got about 10% of the vote, while the moderate candidate won. So I also think that she came through with a very leveled and pragmatic approach to how to win. And what Buffalo is a very conservative area with a very entrenched Democratic Party. So that was a huge, I think, point of being able to win in this district, that she had a very pragmatic campaign and that she didn't go into hyperbole. I think that was one of the greatest sellers on her campaign, at least. But also in the police angle, that is one of her focuses is just to having a jobs program for youth, so being able to fund into community services as a factor of Buffalo is currently on record going into its most violent year, as it is, with 50 people killed in the city of Buffalo just this year, and there has to be some sort of solution, and it's clearly not what's been coming out of the past year under Brown's administration, and I think that shows. And she has a lot more opportunity to actually push this forward, but the race is not over yet.
Yeah. Right, since he is the Republicans aren't even running somebody, right? They're just, I guess at this point, supporting Byron Brown as a write-in candidate.
Yeah. Yeah, the Republicans made a strategic decision. So there's a very competitive race for the Erie County Sheriff. And Erie County is the county the city of Buffalo is in. So the Republicans made a decision not to run a candidate in the Buffalo mayoral election, kind of knowing that it was going to be very steep odds anyways, and hoping to kind of keep the Buffalo voters dormant so that they wouldn't come out for that sheriff's race in Erie County, which is much more competitive, a lot more conservative than the city of Buffalo. So they weren't even running a candidate, and that's why kind of the only option at this point for anything anti-India is for Mayor Brown to to launch a writing campaign.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess just real quickly, I mean, like, do you think he actually has a shot in doing this?
He definitely has about 100% name ID. I mean, a writing campaign is always going to be tough because you got to, get people to take that extra step. So yeah, no, I do think he has a shot for sure. I mean, if I didn't know how well India's ground game was and what a great organization she had around her, I'd say it's a better shot. But we're definitely not going to be underestimating them for sure.
Yeah, I should also say some of the other things I've seen that that India Walton has talked about are trying to have more protections for tenants facing eviction, encouraging cooperatives, having and even though she's I think for probably good tactical instinct shied away from the defund slogan, has talked about about some of the same kinds of reallocations that people are often talking about when they talk about defund police, and also having ways that that like the first call in a mental health situation isn't to an armed cop who might kill someone. So I mean, these are all, I think, exciting things. Real quick before you guys go, do you you want to just talk a little bit about beyond the India Walton campaign, like what the Buffalo DSA has been up to, and like what you've found most effective there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're working on in a chapter is trying to get us outwardly directed. So a lot of chapters might focus a little bit inwardly about certain issues, but one of the things that we've tried to be focusing on is to do external organizing. So in the fall, we moved toward working on the Tax the Rich campaign by partnering with New York City DSA to shore up the budget gap that was about 15 billion, and Cuomo was talking about making up 4 billion of that. Moving on from that, once the budget process was over, the New York Health Act had majority support in both state and state Senate and state Assembly, and clear, easy, kind of stakes for that. But we saw just how rigid they are in terms of being able to pass something that we know on paper has majority support. But if there was ever a time to force the vote, I mean, that was it.
Yeah, right.
And so focusing on easy wins like that are by virtue something that would be, a majority of working class win, have been most of our focus in the past year. And going into this with also India's win, I think that the opportunities that this gives us as a chapter is a whole game changer as well.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, this all sounds like really good work. It doesn't sound like the kind of DSA setting where you're not allowed to clap at a meeting. It sounds like you guys are doing really good stuff. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks,
guys. All right. So before we bring on the great Jason Myles and the equally great Anna Kasparian, I want to play a quick preview for the episode that is dropping on Thursday for patrons, which is my conversation with Roberto Aspholm about an article that he co-wrote with our friend and comrade Cedric Johnson a little while back about what the NFL has been up to that's come out in lawsuits, and how it relates to bigger issues about racism and racial essentialism. So let's just play that really quickly, and then we'll bring on Jason and Anna. You want to start off with just taking us through, like, what it is that they were actually doing that was, at the time you wrote the article, this was alleged in a lawsuit, and now they've admitted it and said they'll stop.
Yeah, absolutely. So this first came to my attention and Cedric's attention back in maybe August of last year. And there was an article, I think it was in the New York Times or another, maybe the Washington Post or one of those papers, that reported on the lawsuits, right, that were filed by Najee Davenport and Kevin Henry in U.S. District Court in Philadelphia. And they were alleging, right, that the NFL was using different scoring scales or benchmarks for evaluating neurocognitive functioning among former NFL players, and as they pertain to claims for traumatic brain injuries, right, and potential recompense for any potential injuries that were suffered during people's playing years. So, and my dad had actually initially, told me about the article, and he was like, "Did you see this?" Right, and I was like, I hadn't seen it, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" Right, like this was to me and to Cedric some pretty appalling stuff, right? And then to your point, right, like, okay, this had been going on for years at this point, like many years at this point, and so how did the NFL get away with this? What was going on? And so Cedric and I thought it was a good kind of entry point for discussing and thinking through some of these issues pertaining to race, racism, exploitation, and inequality that are obviously, paramount issues in both the public discourse and as they pertain to people's actual lives, right?
All right, so you can watch the entire interview or listen to it as podcast on Thursday if you go to patreon.com/Ben Burgess. And of course, also support all of the work that we do here. And you also get access to the post games on Monday nights, the month early access to the monthly Sopranos bonus episodes with Nando Villa, Wosny Lambre, and Mike Racine, the Discord office hours, group voice chats, Discord movie nights. We're going to do one tomorrow night, actually. So again, head over patreon.com/Ben Burgess, as someone else put it in similar situations. Don't be foolish. So in any case, I am going to bring on Anna Kasparian and Jason Myles. Hey, guys.
Hey, what's up?
All right, Jason, you are muted.
I totally muted myself earlier. Sorry.
All right, this is
you, Anna.
Hey, Jason. Nice to meet you.
So, yeah. So one thing that I thought it might be fun to start with is that last week there was somebody in the chat. I don't know if this was like fallout from a debate that I'd done with a libertarian, and somebody found us here or what it was, but somebody in the chat was really pushing this idea, and I said we'd talk about it in the post game, and then we just didn't end up having time. And I thought, hey, Jason Myles is going to be here. We've talked about police issues a bunch in the past, so I'll get Jason's take on it because and also Anna's because we didn't get a chance to talk about it before.
You want to bring this up after we just had a 3-hour show Saturday yelling at the people watching about shit like this.
Yeah, exactly. So so. This person, what they were promoting is the idea that, look, policing is a service, it's security, and people don't, police, mistreat people because they're not customers because they're being paid by the government. So if if police are privatized, then of course they wouldn't treat their customers in this way. So we wouldn't have police violence and brutality. And I mean, I couldn't see any problems with that. That seemed right to me. But I just
been to Iraq or any other place where there's more like private security than there is actual U.S. military troops.
Yeah. So how does that go? Do they treat people really nicely in Iraq?
I can only tell you a real story. I mean, there's other people that we know personally that actually have been there and actually dealt with those cats. I actually, when I went to work in North Dakota in a housing facility for oil field workers, I'm not going to call it a man camp. It was a housing facility for oil field workers. One of the guys that worked there actually was former Blackwater, and he had hit an IUD and lost part of his leg. I know he was all effed up. And, when you work overseas, you have to stay for so long so you don't get hit with the taxes. And he was literally working in the middle of nowhere. Williston, North Dakota is nowhere, just to pay off the taxes that he owed, because he had to come back before his term was up. He was not the nicest person. We did have one brown fellow that was Iraqi there, and he wasn't the nicest person to him. I can't say how he was when he was there in Iraq, but that's kind of a silly notion to think that just because you're private security that you would be nicer because you have some sort of point system for your job. That is amazing.
Yeah, it's like a bad Uber driver, right? I mean, they'll be fine. It's like Dave Rubin's thing about how Yelp reviews can replace regulations.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen how that's worked out in Texas with their deregulated and privatized power grid. We've seen how that's played out in Florida recently with that insanely tragic story with the 13-story building collapsing because they do inspections every 40 years. I mean, it's just the argument that private security would somehow be better than publicly funded policing. The problem isn't where the funding comes from. The problem is that the police that we have now are not actually providing protection to the very people that they purportedly, are supposed to protect. They do the opposite. In case after case, what we see is they swarm in and do what's necessary to protect moneyed interests or capital. I mean, Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street is a perfect example of that. I mean, as soon as Occupy Wall Street started, the New York Police Department received tens of millions of dollars in donations from JP Morgan Chase. Gee, I wonder why that is. So it's just, I think that's the real issue at hand. I think everyone wants to live in a safe community. They want police to actually protect them, not brutalize them.
Yeah, I mean, and I should say, like being serious about this for a second, I wrote an article last year for ARC Digital Media called "The Problem with Libertarian Solutions to Police Violence," where this is the basic point: is that look, the problem with police as they exist now is that most of the population has very little control over what they do. There's this massive power imbalance. Most people don't have like meaningful recourse. The police mistreat them. There's very little democratic accountability. And of course, yes, as you say, Anna, I mean, they are way more responsive to JP Morgan Chase than to like ordinary people who might be in the streets for Occupy Wall Street. But you know what? The one thing that would make that much, much worse is not having the police be at least theoretically owned by the public. That some sort of entity that we have some kind of extremely imperfect level of democratic control over, but having them literally just be employed by JP Morgan Chase, which is what privatized police is. I mean, look at the history of like the Pinkertons, in the 19th century, when they're like literally killing people because their paychecks, weren't being signed certainly by like striking mine workers, or anybody like that, but like literally by the company.
There's several examples. I mean, the prison system is a perfect example because there definitely are prisons that are run with private guards that aren't federal employees. And those are the prisons where you usually see people with cell phones. And, you know, again, heard some awesome stories about some of these federal prisons that are run privately. And a guy that I had met in touring, he was a promoter that had did some time. Not shocking for a promoter, as you know, Anna, you are a California native as I. So he was telling us a funny story about how he was in this one prison where the guards kind of didn't give a shit because they were making like $10 an hour. So all the dudes would be taking selfies outside of the bars with these cell phones that they had snuck in, which is contraband. You can't have cell phones in there, right? But they didn't give a shit because they were paid like, you know, $10, $15 an hour. And also the treatment that you get. And, you know, we can have a whole other discussion about prison guards and treatment. But and also where I worked for a Operation Room Key Shelter. Originally, they wanted to have police out front of the shelter, and that was very costly. So instead, we had private security. And, you know, one aspect that this person isn't looking at is the exploitation of the people that you get when it comes to private security. We originally had a bunch of kids. I stressed kids, I mean like 19, 20-year-old kids. Then they all left because a lot of them had worked at Tesla. And when Elon Musk opened early, they all left because Elon Musk promised them an extra couple bucks. And then we got quite a few guys that were working upwards of 20 plus hours a day and 7 days a week.
Jesus.
And no one was reporting this to the county, that these guys were working that hard and that long. So the exploitation that you get when you talk about private anything is, I mean, we can, if you want to have a conversation about this, again, I could just tell you about working at the shelter alone, because so much of this is privatized and funded with federal dollars from the nonprofit organizations that run it, that don't care about the violence inside, to the security guards that are extremely overworked, under-equipped. I mean, it's a problem. So I don't see how someone would think like that's one of those galaxy brain ideas you have when you just hate the idea because you have it in your head from watching these Dennis Prager videos like you showed earlier on, that socialism is free stuff that comes from like magic money in the sky. And that magic money in the sky is always your wallet. And a lot of that comes from like old Reagan era welfare queen BS. So, I mean, that's my...
Yeah. I mean, anytime you introduce a profit motive to any part of society, right? Any type of service that people need, what are companies going to do? I mean, their only objective is to make a profit. And so the only way they can do that is to cut the costs of what they're doing to increase their profits. So are they going to hire the best people to work for them and pay them well? Of course not. They're going to overwork their workers. They're going to pay them very little. And they're going to find ways to cut corners in order to maximize their profits. Like, it's such a terrible idea to think that moving toward private security is somehow a real solution to what we're experiencing right now. The problem isn't that police are funded through taxpayer money. The problem is that police, first of all, there's like very little accountability. Communities have very little say in regard to the hiring practices and the qualifications that cops need to have. And I think the biggest issue actually is that local police departments are operating as if they don't work for the communities that pay them, right? Like right now in Ohio, they're trying to pass like a piece of legislation that prevents people from being able to film the cops as they're engaging in policing in public. But no, I mean, there's supposed to be accountability and transparency when, taxpayer money is involved, when public funding is involved. I mean, people forget they work for us. We don't work for them. So they should be held accountable. So I think like the culture is what needs to change, not the funding mechanism.
Yeah. And I mean, you should also like, hey, at least with like, yeah, health insurance, like if this like a priori argument that that if something's private, then they'll see everybody as customers, and you know they won't be like abusive and oppressive, you know, to customers. Like if that worked, that should be at least as true there, right? Because in fact, it should be more true there, because likely if we lived in some sort of Mad Max hellscape where all the police were private, most of us would not be employers of police, you know, because we couldn't afford it. Whereas it's not like we'd all have our own individual cop, you know, following us around as a bodyguard. You know, they'd be employed by wealthy people. Whereas health insurance, at least if you're lucky enough to, you know, to have it, you know, is something that that you know we all are customers for. But strangely, that doesn't seem to stop them from acting abusively towards those customers and trying very hard not to save their lives if they can possibly get away with it.
It's RoboCop. I mean, the guy has basically never seen RoboCop. Or
that's the solution. The person pushing this should see RoboCop. But
that's
yeah.
RoboCop. Like I said on the show before we broke down the movie RoboCop, and Anna, I don't know if you've seen a RoboCop. I know Ben and I are old. And I'm even.
It's older. Been a while since I've seen it, but I have seen that movie. Yes,
it's if you go back and watch it with this lens, right? Because now you're an adult. It's kind of a how-to introduction to neoliberalism. A city is overrun with crime, and they're going to get rid of these cops with robotic cops, and these robotic cops don't take breaks, and they don't want benefits. I believe that's like a line early on in the movie that they don't want benefits. So I think everybody kind of wants, the guy wants RoboCop, but forgets how that movie starts off in the boardroom with dude getting shot up by the big robot that I can't remember the name of it. If you remember the name of it, Ben.
No, I don't, but I do remember having the same thought that, I mean, like watching RoboCop now, I mean, that is like the way that they're bragging at the company meeting at the beginning, that that they're offering services and all sorts of things that nobody ever thought that a private company could do, and you know, entering into to all of these new areas. I mean, it is like basically, you know, 90s and, you know, 2000s and 2010s, you know, neoliberalism, you know, right down to what's happened to the city of Detroit in that time period, which is also, you know, like that same kind of level of suffering and, you know, post-industrial decay, you know, has gone on all over the place, and I think is the backdrop to the victory that we were talking about earlier, which is like, I don't know. I mean, like I know a lot of people like seem to be very jaded about this, and they've kind of decided in advance that's not a big deal, but that still seems like a very, very big deal to me. That somebody who calls yourself a socialist and certainly running on stuff that goes like way beyond what like a normal sort of progressive-ish Democratic candidate, you know, was running on, is actually going to be the mayor of a city as big as Buffalo.
Well, is it going to be kind of Cooperation Jackson-esque, like Chokwe Lumumba in Jackson, Mississippi? Or is it going to be kind of socialist in name only?
Well, I mean, we'll see.
And I say that because I think a lot of people that love the reactionary, what do we call it, AOC discourse.
Yeah, people.
You're not leftist enough. You're not far left enough because you're in electoral politics. You're not left enough because you said vote. Like the issue that we got into in the show is that we had, speaking of police violence, we had Flint Taylor on the show, who was Fred Hampton's lawyer. He was a lawyer for he's actually the lawyer in the hogtie case that's going on right now in North Carolina, where the police, who weren't supposed to hogtie anyone, hogtied a man who was literally asking for help, and then he died.
Jesus.
Yeah. And we were talking about, I was with a friend that actually I think all of us know. I'll leave his name out of this. and talking about kind of how the left has no real infrastructure because people just aren't interested in infrastructure, and the right has infrastructure. When I say infrastructure, I mean like there's people on the right that are going to become district court judges, Supreme Court judges. They're going to be sheriffs. They're going to be chiefs of police. They're going to be aldermans. And we're still fighting over, you know, is voting worth
nonsense?
Is electoral politics worth it? And it's all of it, right? You need to have a movement. And what was so interesting to me about following the things going on in Jackson, Mississippi with Cooperation Jackson, it's not just a mayor and then everybody waits for him to do stuff. Sorry, I'm gonna curse. It's an entire movement, and he's part of it. And they understand that they can only get so much done when you're also constantly fighting a major pushback. Like I love what the Debt Collective is doing out of Southern California. It's amazing. They've been on the show multiple times. Love those dudes. But imagine if they actually did have help in office.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm really glad. I'm so happy that you're talking about this right now, because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately for obvious reasons. I mean, the infighting is just out of control and insane. And the infighting is on, you know, incredibly like dumb, irrelevant stuff. And, you know, especially when it comes to electoral politics, which, you know, I certainly agree that electoral politics is not the end all be all. However, it is one avenue in which we need to be paying attention, and we need to vote strategically. And so an example that I gave on weekends for Jacobin was, you know, the Supreme Court, for all of the negative attention this conservative Supreme Court has gotten in regard to potential terrible rulings on social issues, actually is not going to rule terribly on social issues. They just decided not to take up a case regarding, you know, a transgender student, allowing a lowercase ruling that voted in favor of the transgender student to stand. They've actually been pretty good, even though they're conservative judges, on these social issues. The problem with this Supreme Court is that on corporate issues, they will consistently vote against the American people and the American worker. So there were two awful rulings just recently, one of which, by the way, reversed the gains made by Cesar Chavez in California in regard to organizing among farmers. Basically, the courts ruled that since the organizers for unions would be coming onto the private property of farmers or the farm owner, that violates the private property, and as a result, they're not allowed to do that. So it's going to be even more difficult now for farmers to be able to organize, because the union representatives won't be able to show up to the farm and help them organize. That was one bad ruling. The other terrible ruling by the Supreme Court recently was that there were these 6 individuals who had been trafficked into the cocoa trade in Africa. I forget which country they were from, but they were forced into the cocoa trade. They were from other African countries, but they were forced into the Ivory Coast to do the cocoa trade. And so they wanted to sue Nestle because Nestle is profiting from that, right? And all of the financial decisions are made in the United States. It's a US-based company. And the Supreme Court is like, this human trafficking, child trafficking, isn't happening in the United States. So as a result, we are not going to hold Nestle accountable. We're not going to allow this lawsuit to move forward. I give you guys those 2 examples because strategic voting matters. Anyone who said, oh, who cares if it's Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton? Who cares? It's not a big deal. It's just the Supreme Court. No, it matters, because conservatives are smart and strategic, and they build and accumulate power, honestly, very effectively. Whereas the left is like, you voted for Hillary Clinton or you voted for Biden, you're not left enough. I mean, it's just childish. It's foolishness. I can't stand it.
So we were having an argument before I came on. I'll be totally honest. I was a little nervous. There's some stuff going on in my house, and I have a big Adolph Reed's coming on tomorrow, Ben, and I got to get ready for that. That's always a hoot. And I knew I was doing this show, and I was like, shit, I don't know what Ben wants to talk about, and I'm kind of nervous. I don't want to come on here looking like a boob, like I don't know anything. and we were having this argument out of nowhere, me, Pascal, and Jean Bajlan, about Donald Trump. And it is a silly argument, right? And it's funny that you say that, because a lot of these arguments are really silly when it comes to voting. But there's one thing Pascal had said that I thought was very interesting, that Donald Trump pushed through like 200 judges while he was in office. Again, that's power. That's a power structure that cats don't really understand because they just don't get it. A lot of people, we have to be honest with the fact that a lot of people got radicalized either in 2016 or this past election. So there's a lot to this shit. It's easy to put on a shirt with a hammer and a sickle and say I'm a ML or I'm a this or I'm a that. It's hard to truly understand power.
Yeah, right. I mean, and the things that like that, all of the discussion about that was so superficial, and it's bound up with this like moralizing, like if you vote for somebody because elections are about comparative choices and you know that one of them is going to win, you know, that like that's like a moral endorsement of everything, you know, of everything about that, right? Which is dumb, right? I mean, I've always, Adolf Reed had a great article in 2016 called "Vote for the Line, Neoliberal Warmonger. It's Important," which is kind of self-evident what what Adolf's argument was in that article, but also because I mean all of the so much of the argument about that election was about like whatever sort of grabbing the headlines, which is not necessarily the stuff that was actually most dangerous about Trump. A lot of which, I mean, Trump had a really flashy personality, but a lot of it was the stuff that was most dangerous about Trump have also been like dangerous about like Mitt Romney or whoever, right? You know, that they're going to appoint these god awful Federalist Society ghouls, you know, to all these judicial positions. They're going to appoint people like John Bolton, you know, to foreign policy positions. They're going to appoint hardcore union busters to the National Labor Relations Board. And I guess this also does go back. I want to switch gears in just a second, but I mean, this does go back to what you're saying about Buffalo, since, I mean, so Cooperation Jackson, if people aren't familiar with it, you know, look it up, right? It's a good, it's a good model in many ways, you know, and there are aspects of what India Walton has talked about that do sort of hearken to that. Like even in her victory speech, she talks about having more cooperatives and things like that. But of course, that's something that you get because you have a movement, right? You know, not just like individuals here and there in this or that office. But I mean, my big pitch on this is that part of the importance of it is that if people see like somebody like India Walton winning an election in like a real city, you know, like Buffalo, like that inspires people to run for all kinds of other things and think they could actually win, you know, all those other offices that you're mentioning, you know, Jason. And I mean, that itself, I think that itself could be huge, right? I mean, like, even if like you have the most pessimistic projections about what you can do from the mayor's office or what kind of pressures, you know, should be under, I mean, I think that itself makes it,
Chase Boudin in San Francisco is a great example, right? Here you have a guy who, his dad was a weatherman, dude, right? He's only known his dad from behind bars, committing crazy political crimes. He becomes a public defender and then runs for district attorney of San Francisco, major metropolitan area, wins. First thing he does is kick out cats that were way too cool with police violence. Wants to get rid of cash bail and is doing it. Letting some people out of jail that's been sitting in there too long for silly shit. So there's some power there, but he's kind of a man alone as well, because also when you're this far left and this far radical, you're not going to get the media attention. Shahid Buttar is a great example of that. Here you have a dude running in San Francisco against not just the most recognizable congressperson before the cult of personality that you can say AOC, and I don't say that in a bad way. I just mean that she kind of has taken up a lot of oxygen in the internet and media sphere. But Nancy Pelosi, name brand recognition, extremely powerful. You're not just taking on Nancy Pelosi, as the great Michael Brooks said it in a video that we're both in, by the way. You're taking on the entire Democratic Party establishment when you're taking on someone like that. And you look at what happened to his campaign.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, you know that you're taking on the Democratic Party establishment when the first real attack you get has to do with unsubstantiated claims of like sexual misconduct. Yes. It's just, I've seen it happen over and over again. You know, it's just, anyway. And also like, the corporate Democrats are really good at weaponizing identity. It's not just that they engage in identity politics, it's that they weaponize identity and they weaponize very legitimate cultural movements, right? So like Me Too started off as something genuine and important. And then they found a way to use it to their advantage as like a campaigning tool to immediately shoot down anyone who challenges their power. And Shahid Buttar certainly did that.
Yeah,
I mean, he's a personal friend. Actually, Ben is in that video as well. I
was at the guy who filmed it was on TM. He was like sitting on the couch like a night I was on TMBS to film Michael Ford after, and then like we were like. I think we're all at a bar later. He's like, "Hey, you want to go outside, like do like a minute, you know, for the video." So that's why I'm randomly in the San Francisco congressional campaign ad. But yeah, right. And this is actually a really good transition because I wanted to do this before we and I hope you can both stick around for a few minutes of the post game. But I have but before we finish the main show, I did want to do this because there was a bit that you did on Weekends a little while back, Anna, where you're talking about the exact thing that you just mentioned, and I think in particular the way that establishment Democrats have weaponized the cultural stuff and what that sort of leaves them with, politically. Kale, do we have the clip?
James Carville, a longtime political strategist with a knack for defending the Democratic Party's shift to neoliberalism, now has a problem with what neoliberalism has reduced the party to. In an interview with Vox, Carville offered a pretty salty rejection of woke culture. And he even argued that Biden's biggest attribute is that he's not into faculty lounge politics. They come up with a word like Latinx that no one else uses. Now, I think that the example of the word Latinx is perfect to describe the problem with woke culture. Essentially, people coming in and deciding to change an entire language based on identity-related politics, even when the very people who speak that language never asked for it. But he goes on to say that as a result, large parts of the country view Democrats as an urban, coastal, arrogant party, and a lot gets passed through that filter. That's a real thing. I don't give a damn what anyone thinks about it. It's a real phenomenon, and it's damaging to the party brand. And to be clear, he's right about that. You know, on the surface, when you read these statements, it's hard to disagree with him. Carville, in fact, even brings up the same jarring examples of Class D alignment that the socialist left is concerned about, mentioning how in 2018 in Florida, giving felons the right to vote got 64%. In 2020, a $15 an hour minimum wage. Has anyone in the Democratic Party said, maybe there's nothing wrong with the state of Florida? Maybe the problem is the kind of campaigns we're running. Now, again, Carville has a point, but he seems to be oblivious to Class D alignment in the first place. He obviously feels like there's something afoot, there's something wrong, but he can't really put his finger on it. And he really just boils it down to language and messaging. But there's more to it than that. In fact, his own class interests stop him from considering the severity of the problem and limit him to critiques of unpopular slogans and finger wagging by PC enforcers. If Carville really stopped to ask himself what the Democratic establishment would campaign on in the absence of woke posturing, what would it be? What would their sincere politics be? What would their message be? How would they appeal to voters? And how did the party get to where it is today? Much like establishment Republicans who intentionally base their politics on culture and nonsense, like Mr. Potato Head, to avoid having substantive discussions about inequalities, the Democratic Party has latched onto its own version of the culture war. Yep. That girl knows what she's talking about.
She does.
I was like, oh no, I hate watching myself. So when you said you were going to play a clip of me, I'm like, oh no. But no, I still agree with everything I said there.
You should never be ashamed. We were talking about you the other day and Ben Dixon because y'all have the best lighting.
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, damn, man, they got killer lighting. Me and Ben out here looking like night trolls, and you guys got bomb-ass lighting.
Fair enough. You know, what you're saying in the clip, I mean, the good lighting notwithstanding, you know, like the actual content of it, this is really striking. And I remember having that same thought when I first saw the Carville thing, that like, okay, 99% of what he's saying is just obviously true, but it's also hilarious that he's saying it, because like, how did these guys get like that? Like, how does he think this happened? It's because any like sort of emptying out of like, never mind like real social democracy, anything like that, but even like sort of pre-Clinton, you know, left liberalism, the complete emptying out of that, and the embrace of austerity, and you know, and just like, you know, market-based, solutions and all of this garbage, you know, by the Democratic Party establishment. Yeah, I mean, if they don't have their side of the culture war, what do they have? Exactly.
I mean, what do they campaign on? Because when you really focus on their messaging and campaigns, it's on one hand, they do at least identify the inequalities in the country, whether it's racially, somewhat economically, but they tend to stay away from that kind of messaging. And it's all hollow, right? It's all to say we're the more moral party, right? Like, we're the ones who recognize that these inequalities exist, right? And they'll look, I mean, perfect example. What was the Democratic messaging in regard to Donald Trump's treatment of asylum seekers at the border? And now you look at how asylum seekers are being treated right now under the Biden administration. Honestly, there's virtually no difference. And what both Democrats and Republicans tend to do, and I think it's just crystal clear at this point, is they want to find something else to campaign on, because neither party wants to actually do anything that materially improves Americans' lives, right? I mean, I think Republicans are more brazen about that, but Democrats will try to like deflect from any conversation regarding, you know, true structural changes that need to be made in our country in order to actually root out inequality. And so instead they'll pretend, and I say pretend because their actions prove it, they'll pretend to care about racism. They'll pretend to care about sexism. They'll pretend to care about all sorts of things that when, in reality, when push comes to shove, they actually don't do what's necessary to improve people's lives. I mean, the $15 an hour minimum wage is a perfect example of that, right? They purport to care about the African-American community. Well, Black women are overrepresented in minimum wage jobs. So an easy way to materially improve their lives is to push through at this point, honestly, $15 an hour. It's not even enough in regard to like how much the cost of living is in much of the country. But even that, like just increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 an hour really does improve the lives of Black women, right? But it's also a universal program or universal policy that would affect anyone who's working a minimum wage job, right? But they'll anytime they have an opportunity to do the right thing and actually provide something materially, they don't do it. That's why I don't believe anything the Democratic Party says about like how they care about rooting out racism. And you can't pass laws that just punish people, right? Like that doesn't do away with racism. That doesn't, but you can pass laws that genuinely improve people's lives and livelihoods. And they don't do that because they're funded by the same people.
Yeah, those laws are incredibly popular. I mean, one of Carville's examples, again, hilarious that he's bringing it up, like considering his history and pushing, Clinton's and, neoliberal turn in the Democratic Party. But like one of his examples, right, that minimum wage referendum in Florida, won in Florida and Trump won Florida, and the minimum wage law won by more than Trump did. So, I mean, if that doesn't tell you something right there about like what the electoral calculus, would be like, running on that, I don't know what would. But I'm glad that you brought up the border stuff because I do want to. We have a story about that. Want to start with that at the beginning of the post game. But we're going to have to cut off the main show here. Thank you guys both so very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shout out Weekends.
Oh, that was great.
Yes, watch Anna on Weekends on Jacobin at 1 Eastern with our friend comrade and monthly Sopranos recapper Nando Villa, and of course also on TYT. Watch Jason on This Is Revolution with Pascal Robert, interviewing Adolf Reed tomorrow. That's awesome. And meanwhile, if you're a patron, watch them both in about 30 seconds.
Peace.